So welcome everyone. Thank you so much for joining our garden office hours conversation on plant selection. And I'm Annie Silverman. I'm a senior programs coordinator, and I'm joined by my colleague Connor, the programs coordinator. And we would like to thank the City of Petaluma for making this presentation possible. Daily Acts is a holistic education nonprofit that takes a heart-centered approach to inspiring transformative actions that create connected, equitable, and climate-resilient communities. We believe in the power of our daily actions to reconnect people to self, community, and place, which helps to heal our society and planet. Now, you might be wondering, what does that mean? What does Daily Acts do? Our holistic approach to addressing the current needs starts in the soil and swells into culture and policy change. We have sustainability programs that historically focused on landscape transformations, starting back in 2009 by sheet mulching thirsty lawns and selecting beautiful drought-tolerant plants like the ones we'll be talking about tonight. Our sustainability programs give people the skills and tools to conserve resources. Because change happens through collaboration, we also invest in strengthening community leadership. Our Leadership Institute for Just and Resilient Communities is a 10-month program that trains leaders to step up to the many challenges our community faces today, while embracing the complexity of the interconnected systems at play. We are also home to the Environmental Health Network that provides education and resources to our frontline agricultural workers in Sonoma County. And just last year, we adopted the amazing Eco to School program, which Kevin here is with our Eco to School program, that inspires youth to take immediate climate action. We foster networks and alliances while partnering with municipalities here in Sonoma County and beyond. And we are always trying to ignite and inspire change in our community through action campaigns that we host each year. We do all of this through personal ecology because we believe that transforming the world begins with transforming ourselves. So welcome everyone. We are so happy to have you here. We're so happy to see your faces. We're really looking forward to a conversation. We chose to go with a meeting instead of a webinar because we really want to foster conversation and sharing. And we know that some of you are experts yourselves, and we're really looking forward to being able to share our knowledge together. With that being said, please keep your microphone on mute during the presentation and when you're not speaking. If a question does arise during the presentation, please use the chat box. And if something is relevant, then I'll bring it up immediately to Connor. And if not, then save it for the end of the presentation where we'll be able to have that conversation. So as you might notice, we are recording this, and we would like to record the question and answer session at the end too. There's usually so much knowledge sharing that happens then. But if you are not comfortable being recorded in the conversation afterwards, please send me a private message and we'll stop the recording. All right, I'll hand it over to Connor now.
Thanks, Annie. So at Daily Acts, we like to start out our programs with a quote, and I felt this one was relevant to our topic tonight from the horticultural mastermind, Gertrude Jekyll. A garden is a grand teacher. It teaches patience and careful watchfulness. It teaches industry and thrift. Above all, it teaches entire trust. So before we jump into the fun stuff, just going to set a little bit of context. For those of us who live in Sonoma County, it will not come as a surprise, but we are in a drought. Just over a week ago, the Board of Supervisors declared a local drought emergency. It was on the 27th of April, and the governor signed a state of emergency proclamation for both Sonoma County and Mendocino County. So as we all know, that means we need to be collectively conserving water. It's definitely a shared effort between all of us. On average, households use about 50% of their total water use outside. So outside is a great place to start with water conservation efforts, and usually a little more fun than the water conservation we do inside. Just for an example, by converting a 1,000 square foot turf lawn into a low water use landscape, you save about 15,000 gallons of water a year, which is almost 40 gallons a day. which to me is pretty remarkable. The first step in making a transition like that, at least with Daily Act, is called sheet mulching, which is basically killing the grass and composting it in place, getting your soil ready. We have lots of resources about sheet mulching that we can share with you in our follow-up email, including the office hours webinar recording from last month. Those of you who live in Petaluma, I highly recommend you checking out the city's Mulch Madness program to see if you qualify for a rebate to offset your costs for sheet mulching. Those of us who don't live in Petaluma, a lot of cities around Sonoma County and even beyond have their own rebate programs as well. So definitely worth looking into if you're thinking about making these kinds of transformations. So today, before we jump into our open discussion, I'm just going to take us on a little tour of some favorite Daily Acts plants in these 4 categories. Almost all the plants I'm going to be talking about are low water use, and many of them are natives, but let's start things off with pollinator-friendly plants. This photo is from one of our model sites in Windsor. It's called the Foothills of Windsor Homeowners Association. You can see a bunch of low water use natives here, really beautiful yarrow, California poppy, penstemon, and a few others. I'm going to be going through these kind of rapid fire, but we can definitely talk about any of them in more detail as we move forward. And also we'll send you the recording, or if we choose not to record, we'll send you the PowerPoint so that you can have these as kind of references. So the first one is sticky monkey flower. At the nursery, you might see it as Mimulus aurantiacus or Diplicus aurantiacus, sometimes called the bush monkey flower. This is a very low water use plant. It's a California native. Important to note that there are some like hybrid cultivars that are not very low and are in fact like moderate water use. So just be careful to take note of what you're picking up at the nursery. This is a big hit with bees, hummingbirds, and butterflies. If you live in Petaluma and you want to see one in person, if you go over to fire station number 2, which is the fire station on the corner of McDowell and Corona, we have a model site there where there are a few sticky monkey flowers just really putting on a show right now. Definitely a favorite of mine. Next, we've got California fuchsia. Some people call this the hummingbird plant. You have these tube-shaped, bright red flowers, one of the only things blooming in the peak of summer, and it'll last through the autumn. That shape is just perfect for hummingbird beaks. And it's a ground cover, so it's not very tall. It's a good spreader, works well in mass plantings. We have coyote mint, which is a locally native variety of this monardella plant. Beautiful pink purple flowers. It's another very low water use. And one thing I like about it is that you won't get as many blooms, but it will tolerate half shade. And the deer aren't big fans of it. Anyone who lives around deer knows there's no such thing as deer proof, but this is pretty close. We have autumn sage, also called Texas sage. So this is not native, but it does really well in Sonoma County. So many different varieties, colors from kind of like white and cream, yellow, the red we see here, some really stunning purples and blues. I have a purple one in my garden that started blooming a month ago and it's not showing any signs of slowing down. Big hit with butterflies and hummingbirds. This is another that will take part shade, and mine is definitely in part shade and puts on quite a few flowers. Pretty compact, about 2 or 3 feet tall on average. And then there's the classic yarrow. This specific type of yarrow, the Aquileia millefolium, this is our California native. It's a bee magnet and it's very low water use and drought tolerant. But again, similar to the sticky monkey flower, there are lots of hybrids so that you can have all these wonderful colors like kind of salmon and neon yellow. And some of those are moderate water use. So just always be aware that just because it says Aquileia millefolium at the nursery, if there's an extra name there, check what its water needs are. This is another ground cover. You can actually use yarrow as a lawn substitute, which is really nice. Lots of medicinal qualities, all around lovely plant. So speaking of ground covers, and you can see in this photo here, this kind of lime green, that's a variety of Ceanothus griseus, which I'm going to talk about a very similar variety called Yankee Point. That classic color combo of the darker green foliage and these lovely light blue clusters of flowers. This is one of the first things, at least in my garden, that I see blooming in the spring, really late winter, and the bees go crazy for it. The flowers have it's not a really strong fragrance, but it is pleasant. And if you crush the flowers, they have a lot of saponin, so it's kind of soap-like. Low water use, in fact, the most common cause of early death of Ceanothus is being overwatered. So they're a great drought choice, and will take half shade. Again, you won't get quite as many flowers, but yeah, pretty versatile. We have the blue-eyed grass, which is this kind of cute, low-growing ground cover. It works really well between rocks and on the banks and higher edges of rain gardens. The foliage looks kind of like irises. Low water use. Once they get established, they're drought tolerant. You can grow them in part shade, but for the maximum blooms, again, you really want that full sun. So here's one of our moderate water use plants. And I want to talk mostly about this variety, Fragaria vesca, the woodland strawberry, which is a California native. You'll see these along with Fragaria chiloensis sometimes on the coast. Like if you've ever gone to the Pinnacle Gulch hike in Bodega Bay, there's a lot of this growing on the slopes. And this variety does have edible berries. They're pretty small, but they pack a really sweet punch. In my experience, they will grow pretty well and put out a decent amount of fruit with low water, like on an irrigation cycle with low water use plants. But the more water they get within reason, the more and juicier fruit there will be. Something good to note about these is that they're clay tolerant. So a lot of California natives want quick draining soil. They grow on hillsides, kind of sandy, loamy. But if you're living, Petaluma or Santa Rosa, where you've got that slow draining soil, this can be a really good choice for you. Sonoma sage, another locally native plant. This will sprawl quite a bit, so it's a good filler as a ground cover, which is a great quality. Another that will work well in half shade. This is a bit zoomed out, but they do have these really wonderful spikes of blue-violet flowers that are really popular with really all the pollinators. About 2 feet tall, 5 feet wide. In the right conditions, like in their native habitat, they can spread to be as much as 15 feet wide, which is pretty spectacular. Spring and summer bloomer. I'm going to talk about a few different varieties of manzanita in the next few minutes. This is one of the ground covers that's really popular with landscapers around here because it's very hardy, and manzanita is a slow grower, but this one does a good job of filling space. Will take part shade and isn't very picky about the type of soil that it's growing in. You'll sometimes see these planted in mass, covering a huge amount of space. They do have small white flowers. That's urn shape that manzanita flowers do have, but this variety, not the most spectacular blooms as far as manzanitas go. Better for that really fun circular foliage. Which brings us to shade plants. This here is a picture of Oregon grape, Mahonia aquifolium. Some people say Berberis aquifolium. I'll get to that one in a moment. But this one I know is one of Annie's favorites, and we've worked it into a number of our model sites, including at Petaluma City Hall, the red flowering currant, specifically the King Edward, the 7th variety. It works well as a climbing vine or even as a shrub, kind of like a hedgerow. It's pretty compact, but it can grow very tall. You can't quite see in this photo, but they will produce these like hanging clusters of these lovely crimson flowers, which then produce berries that have this good contrast of dark blue, drought tolerant once established. They'll do well in half shade as well. There will be more flowers, but I've seen these thrive, under the oak canopy and still put on a good show of that lovely color.
And if I might interrupt here, because it's one of my favorite plants,
Absolutely.
you end up seeing these beautiful drooping pink clusters of flowers in late winter before much else is blooming, very similar to ceanothus, although this is actually an earlier bloomer than ceanothus. And it starts blooming when all of the foliage, because it is deciduous, will lose all its leaves in the fall and winter. And then it has these beautiful clusters of flowers that start before any of the leaves grow back. And it's really just like, it's so striking. And it is an ornamental currant, so the berries are not really much to eat. It's a cultivar that's grown specifically for its flowers, and can't recommend enough. It's just beautiful when you're really looking forward to seeing flowers in February.
Mm. Yeah, thank you, Annie. Well, the birds like the berries. They're not great for us, but the birds do. Okay, next we've got hummingbird sage. This is a plant that grows through its rhizomes. So, you'll plant one and they do a pretty good job of filling in space over time. They do really well under oak canopy, which, we're in no short supply of in Sonoma County. So this is a really popular option. Hummingbirds, as you probably have guessed, really love it. The leaves have this lovely fragrance that draws them in, along with bees and butterflies and all other kinds of pollinating insects. It's low water use. We say it grows 3 feet wide, but really, because of that rhizomatous spread, it can fill in a lot more space than that. It's another spring bloomer, these kind of lovely salvia spikes that we see, somewhat similar to the Sonoma sage. And then here's that Oregon grape I mentioned. So there are a lot of varieties of this plant. The one that I see most frequently in people's gardens is the aquifolium, which is the taller shrub. So that variety is a moderate water use plant. The Mahonia repens, which is more of a spreading ground cover variety, is low water use, but it's just, people don't have quite as much success with it growing in their gardens, which is not to say it won't work, but Mahonia, it's called Oregon grape because of these berries that look somewhat like grapes. So it first puts on that lovely yellow foliage. I'll actually just skip back real quick. This is what the blooms look like. And you can see these serrated leaves that will actually take on yellowish and red coloration as well, depending on their sun exposure. They turn to these blueberries, which you can eat them. They're pretty bitter. A lot of people who do eat them make them into jam, and it takes a lot of sugar to make it palatable, but it's good. They're good for wildlife. These things are tough as heck. They make a variety called soft caress that doesn't have these spines on the serrated leaves. Also a moderate water user, but lots of options, very versatile, great for shade. Douglas iris, along with Pacific Coast iris hybrids. This is another plant you will see growing, especially out on the coast, a native wildflower that is really not particular about how much sun it gets. It works well in full shade. It'll grow in full sun as well. Low water use. Sometimes you'll get a deeper blue-purple coloring on the flowers than what we see in this photo here. And if you look at the center of the bloom, it's not a great photo for this aspect, but it has some lovely yellow on the inside as well. Attracts moths and butterflies. They spread a decent amount. Really nice complement to so many other shade plants, in my opinion. Got the blue elderberry, which is another that will take most sun conditions. I find they grow pretty well in the shade, though they can get a bit rangy as they stretch out further trying to get to sun. They, in the wild, will often be found in kind of wetland areas where there's a lot of moisture, but they will grow really well as a low water use plant. And not only are they drought tolerant, but a lot of people find that they prefer the habit of the plant when it is a little bit drought stressed because it takes on more of a trunk and sort of a gnarled bark to it. It can be really lovely. Super fast grower. It can go from, a 15-gallon pot to a 30-foot tree in, 2 years. it's very quick and eager to fill in space. Has these cream yellow blooms that turn to purple berries in the fall. You can eat them, they have medicinal qualities, and it supports a lot of different birds as well as pollinating insects. Which brings us to our last category, screening plants. In this photo, you can see they're using a toyon here as a screen, and then the plant in the foreground is a Fremontodendron. This variety, I want to say it's called Ken Taylor, is more of a low-growing spreader, but most Fremontodendron can be very tall and good screens, and I'll go over that in just a moment. But we should start with toyon. Another wonderful California native. A fun fact is that Hollywood in Los Angeles is named after a toyon because of the berries that resemble holly berries, sometimes called the Christmas bush. Full sun, part shade, huge source of food for birds. Bees like the flowers. I think the flowers are not particularly remarkable, but the contrast you get with the red berries is really lovely. They're not going to grow out of control, 8 feet tall, wider than they are tall. Really lovely in lots of different contexts, but they do create a great screen or hedgerow. Coffeeberry is a great companion plant for toyon. You'll sometimes see them growing pretty close to each other in their natural habitat, sometimes called California buckthorn. These are berries that you do not want to eat, just like the toyon, but they are great for wildlife. Somewhat similar in growth habit, maybe a little more compact than the toyon, though it can grow. The habit is more compact, but can actually grow larger. The berries darken as the weather heats up, and they look somewhat like coffee berries, which is how they got the name. Being that they are so dense, they do create a great screen. Pineapple guava is not a native. It's from South America. We use this plant in a lot of our model sites. I absolutely love it. It creates these fruits that are described as being guava-like in flavor. I wouldn't say that, but I don't know a better analog. They're kind of floral, perfumey in taste. They make a good jam. But I actually like to eat the flower petals more than I like the fruit. There's like kind of succulent petals that taste delicious, and they're kind of like gummies. So it's technically a moderate water use plant. In my experience, they do very well as a low water use plant, but especially if you're using it as a screen and not for fruit production, once it's established, you can get away with not watering this plant at all, which is true for a lot of the natives we've been talking about. You can train it up as a tree. It responds well to all kinds of pruning, but if we're thinking of it as a screening plant, you likely will grow it densely as a screening shrub, as we see in the photo here. And then there's a little close-up of the flowers, which have these like silken red, kind of similar to bottle brush flowers. And I believe this is our last one. I mentioned just a few moments ago, the Fremontodendron, the flannel bush. Lovely California native. Flowers are opening up. The one in my garden just opened up last week. I noticed there's a big one in front of Harmony in Sebastopol that's been blooming for a few weeks now. Very low water use plant once established. Grows in very densely, gets pretty big pretty quickly. The one downside is you wouldn't want this in a really high traffic area because there are hairs on the leaves that can be a bit of a skin irritant. Not everybody reacts to it, but not ideal in that way. Yeah, drought tolerant, butterflies love it. So with that, oh, I lied. We had one more. This is one of my favorite specimen trees for our area, the Howard McMinn variety of manzanita. So unlike the flannel bushes, manzanita are very slow growing, but you can train these up to be gorgeous trees. You can even have them as single trunk They have those lovely, iconic, urn-shaped, white, pale pink flowers that start up in winter and spring. So when not all that much is in bloom, great with pollinators. If you wanted an even bigger variety than the Howard McMahon, like a true tree, because these will really get about 8 to 10 feet tall. Louisa Edmonds has very similar characteristics, but is larger. Um, in the wild, they'll often be growing in full sun, especially closer to the coast. Somewhere like Petaluma, I would recommend planting it somewhere where it would get afternoon shade. All right, so that was a very quick, rapid fire tour of some Dahliac favorite plants. And before we jump into the fun stuff, I will pass it back to Annie to go over some of our upcoming events.
Thank you for the review of such beautiful plants, Connor. That was really fun. As somebody who's immersed in the plant world, it was a nice opportunity to sit back and have all of these, Connor explain all these beautiful plants we use. So we have a couple of events that are really geared towards civic engagement. We have a 10-month leadership program and a webinar on Wednesday, May 19th from 7 to 8 p.m. with our leadership manager to learn about the program, because registration is going on right now. And we also have another program called Be a Drought and Climate Hero that is really focused on flexing your climate advocacy muscles and features a documentary film that Connor directed, produced, and did everything on. And so we recommend that you tune into those two programs. And we have two more we'd like to talk about. We have another monthly garden office hours conversation taking on the topic of gray water. As we're entering into a drought, it's important to think both about how to consume less water and about how to reuse the water that you're already paying for. And so this will be a lively conversation that will talk about laundry to landscape systems and have plenty of time to be able to ask questions and find out more about whether this could be a solution for your spot. And then our other webinar is on growing healthy soils. And everything starts with soil. That's your foundation for life. And this webinar will be a deep dive into how you can cultivate that healthy soil, which will then sequester more carbon, store more water, and support these beautiful, healthy plants that we've been talking about today in this webinar. So we look forward to seeing you at some of these future events. And we'd also like to give a shout out to our sponsors who support our work and make these types of events and the other civic engagement and networking that we do possible. And with that, let's get started with this question and answer. We are going to be sending you all of the resources that we'll talk about during this question and answer time. And we'll also be sending you a recording of the webinar. And if you have any questions, you can reach out to myself or Connor, and we'd be happy to talk with you about your landscapes. It's one of the things we love most about our jobs. All right, so we'll open it up. Does anybody have any questions that they'd like to throw out? Who wants to be first? I'm sure you all have been jotting down questions and have some plant curiosities. If not, there were a couple of questions that came in through the chat. Gabriella.
Yeah, so I am interested in the last one that was put into the chat with regards to establishing new plants, only because my yard, we did a mulch situation with the Mulch Madness program, maybe 4 or 5 years ago. But we have a bunch of weeds that just came through because the cardboard has now, like, I think we've done the cardboard and mulch twice since the first time we did it. And now, like with this last season, the weeds just came through and went crazy. So not sure the approach we should take, given that we'd like to get something established in there, but with the drought, it's like a complete new transformation that we have to do. So any recommendations for that situation? Because I don't want to keep the weeds going through, like I need to do something about the weeds and get rid of them.
What kind of weeds do you have coming up? Is it like a crabgrass or Bermuda grass or something else?
So we have a lot of dandelions and grass. I'm not sure what kind of grass it is, but it's getting high, and some of that nettle,
Okay.
like the pokey stuff.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Unfortunately, sheet mulching helps knock back weeds, but it doesn't completely eradicate them. And so hand pulling as you see them coming is one of the best ways to try and tackle them. And bit by bit, if they're already feeling kind of out of control, you can try just weed whacking back to get a closer to a clean slate, and then planting something that's going to outcompete those, something that ties into a question that PJ had about whether or not you should start establishing plants now, given that we are entering into a drought. And that can be kind of a tricky when you're starting to establish them. Even those low water and super low water plants are going to need a little bit extra while they still have shallow roots. And I think that kind of depends on your individual situation. I will say that water is really helpful in growing those healthy soils that can sequester more carbon, and that there is a relationship between roots and the roots from plants and the soil bacteria. And so soil really needs roots to be healthy. And so I think that as you're thinking about your landscapes, my personal opinion is to do some planting instead of having no plants throughout this whole summer, which would mean that your soil really wouldn't be receiving any water, which would mean that everything's getting kind of drier and drier. I would recommend selective planting and starting to get your landscapes going. I think it's also a fun opportunity to think about what kind of water reuse that you can apply to be able to help offset some of the water needs of your plants.
Can I ask a follow-up question?
Mhm.
The specific situation is we want to do some turf reduction, which of course is
Yeah.
a good water saving thing. But I live in a condo development, so there are a lot of people who get scared when anything changes. And I
Mhm.
was thinking if we could replace parts of the existing turf lawn with like little demonstration plots of various low water ground covers, so that then people could say you were experience, oh, this is pretty, this is nice. I'd be happy looking at this out my window instead of this greedy lawn. But that's where the question came up. I mean, and we don't know how dire it's going to be, but pretty dire. You know, do we just let the lawn go brown and see what happens next year, or can we, you know, try this demonstration idea without wasting water is what I'm saying. I mean, obviously, if we're not watering the lawn, that's saving water, but anyway, is that?
Yeah, my personal opinion would be that the impact you might have of making that demonstration on your neighbors would outweigh the water it's going to take to establish those plants. Because if you know, if you let the lawn just die and then the rainy season goes by and we turns out we're still in a drought this time next year, all that time has gone by that could have been used for other people to sort of emulate that process and make that
Right.
change on their own.
Well, but it's a collective lawn. It's not
Mhm.
individual. any individual's decision. So that's why I wanted to create some kind of demonstration so that
Right.
people would be okay with the change.
Mhm.
So, okay, well, good. I appreciate that. The idea that if we're successful, it'll be a wonderful water saving thing from now on. And that is worth it. Yeah.
I
Okay,
think so.
great. Thank you.
Yeah. Real quick, I think it was Gabriella. Were you the one were you talking about the weeds coming through your sheet mulch? I
Yeah.
think I heard you mention that you had some nettles as one of the weeds.
Yes.
So I would
Mhm.
recommend, if you have nettles, a good way to control them is they are delicious. You can eat
Mhm.
nettles if they're stinging nettles. Just make sure you like wear gloves when you pick them, and if you blanch them like in boiling water, they lose their stinging quality. And they're kind of like spinach. They're great in like pastas, raviolis, and things like that.
That's really good to know. The thing is that, like, so yeah, the situation's out of control, and my mom, who's in her mid-70s, just does not want the weeds. Like, it became too much to bent for her to bend over and be constantly picking the weeds out. So, like, I'm looking at trying to replace that with drought tolerant plants, but I realized that, yeah, I appreciate the question that someone put in there about, like, well, if you are going to plant something and the water usage. So that was helpful to hear your answer, Annie. And with what we do have now, I might weed whack and grab some of and use your suggestion, Connor, with the existing nettles at least. Thank you.
It's always a struggle when you have sheet mulched and then you have weeds growing through. And I would say for anybody who has invasive plants before they sheet mulch, knowing that that will always be something they'll have to address as their landscape matures. It's just there's no perfect answer when you have those kind of pre-existing invasives. And then also grass seeds will blow in on the wind and land in your nice mulchy environment and germinate. So I think the best solution is to plant and plant densely so that you can then have your landscape mature around it and shade out some of the competing plants. Yeah, Jeanette. We can't hear you, Jeanette.
If you click the little caret next to the mic icon on the bottom of your Zoom screen, and just make sure that it says same as system for your microphone that's selected.
How about now?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. That helped. There was 2 options that said the same as system. I hit the wrong one. Sorry about that. I don't know why it's not defaulting to on. The plant list, only a few mentioned soil, and we have clay. So unless we're doing a whole new area, it's going to be clay. If they didn't say okay with clay, should I assume that they need well-drained soil?
No, I wouldn't say it's quite that cut and dry. We were definitely just trying to not put too much information on each slide. So I can try to track down a list of clay tolerant plants, or I could just give some examples. So like, for example, like the ceanothus that I talked about, the Yankee Point, is not great for clay soils, but there are varieties of ceanothus that are, specifically the Arroyo de la Cruz, which is, it's not a ground cover, it's a taller plant, but it's equally beautiful and will thrive in clay soils. Um, the California fuchsia, the toyon will both do well in clay. Some manzanita species will do well in clay. It probably would be easiest for me to either find or type up a list that I can send in the follow-up email.
That would be great.
Yeah, it'd be my pleasure.
Yeah, thank you.
Jeanette, if I remember correctly, you're in Petaluma, right?
Santa Rosa.
Oh, Santa Rosa, okay. We have a couple of model sites in Petaluma, at the Petaluma Library, as well as our fire station number 2 off of North McDowell and Corona. And those are both really clay sites. I remember planting and it was just like thick, smelly clay. So the plants that you can see there are mostly natives and they're doing all right in clay. And so even though we say that natives really prefer to have well-drained soils and they'll grow faster and be larger when they have those ideal growing conditions, some will still grow in clay. So that could just be, especially the Petaluma Library, it's a place to inspire yourself and see what kind of plants are doing all right in the clay.
Okay, that's a great idea. Thank you.
Yeah, Petaluma Library, especially right now, is incredibly gorgeous. A lot of things are blooming.
Yeah, I have a question. I have a little strip of soil between my fence in my front yard and the sidewalk. And I was thinking about maybe putting a little arrangements of succulents there, but you didn't mention succulents at all. And I'm wondering if there's a reason for that. Are they not native? Are they bad succulents? So what do you think about succulents?
I love them. I
Yeah.
oftentimes kill them. I've had bad luck trying to grow succulents myself, but I think they're great. They're really low water use. They do require really good drainage. That's one thing I would say, is that they oftentimes grow on rocky hillsides and in areas where if you had clay soils, water would probably puddle in the root zone and they would probably rot.
Got it. So probably not the best for Petaluma.
It just depends on your particular soil. Like we're helping the city with a nature preserve in West Petaluma called the Paula Lane Nature Preserve, and it has incredibly sandy soils. So there's a lot of variety just in different parts of the city. The only succulent, I don't even know if it's technically a succulent, but it shares a lot of qualities that I would avoid, is ice plant. Otherwise, I don't know of any issues with succulents other than that they, that you wouldn't want them on the same irrigation cycle as a lot of the other plants we were talking about, because too much water, kind of like the ceanothus, is just, a deal breaker for the succulents.
Yeah, because of that location, because it's not on the drip system at all. So that's one of the reasons I thought it might be good. Okay, good. It's funny you say that about ice plants. They are, we came from Southern California 6 years ago, and ice plants. I mean, that's it. It's all ice plants everywhere.
And they are beautiful. They're just very aggressive.
Yeah.
Karen.
I was wondering if you know of some companies that would, I'm not looking for a company that comes in and designs your garden, wants to put it all in, but I definitely need some assistance or somebody to consult with who would, come walk through the yard with me and say, this is what you need to do to the soil. These are the types of plants that would be here, and kind of help you design something. But I want to do the work. And then also, these are the ways you keep it growing and what you need to do throughout the year to kind of make up a plan that way. Are there companies that you know of here locally that do that?
Well, that's a great question. I would actually open it up to the audience and see if somebody has found a company that they like working with that could provide those types of services.
Yeah, BJ?
We've been working with Permaculture Artisans, which is based here in Sebastopol, and they have a design group that does that kind of design work, and then can come up with like a phased implementation plan. Now, because we're a bigger property, they're doing the work as we can afford it. But I've found them lovely to work with, and we also have them doing our regular landscape maintenance, and their crews are just delightful people, and they're very attentive and pay attention. And I mean, it's such a dramatic change from the mow and blow guys that we've had for years, who just basically trashed the soil and don't really know anything about plants, and so I really can't, it's a wonderful outfit. So it'd be worth at least asking them if that whatever they are offering would work in your situation.
And that's called Permaculture Artisans in Sebastopol?
Correct. And they're located right across from the Sebastopol Flea Market on 116 south of town.
All right, thank you for the suggestion.
Nice people.
And I've worked for years with Leff Landscape Design, Louise Leff, and she only does design. So, she might be somebody who could, fulfill what you want to. And she's always helped us with planning for the future and all of that. So, you could check her out as well. It's Louise Leff, and it's Leff Landscape Designs.
Is that L-E-F-F, Leff?
Yes, L-E-F-F, F as in Frank.
When our City Hall, Petaluma City Hall model site landscape was designed over a decade ago now, I think, Louise Leff made the original design, and then Permaculture Artisans did some modifications, then helped with the installation. So we have ties with both of them, and I would second both of those recommendations.
Right.
Great, thank you.
Another question. We have an area here where a couple of trees have come down. One fell down, and then one we took down because the other tree falling destabilized it. And so now there's this area that's sort of opened up that it's not starting from scratch by any means, and that's the problem. There are so many roots in there, not only from big trees, but from the trees that make that webby kind of roots, that we're having a hard time figuring out what to put in there. It's my mom's place. She's had people come and try and grind up the stump, and then she had them come back because there's more of it. These were two oak trees, and she had a whole design done up by her neighbor, who is a master gardener, and it was this great ambitious plan. And she's acting like it's brand new soil and you can just do anything in it. And we're the ones going to be doing the work, me and my husband. And we're looking at it going, yeah, you can't get through that stuff. And there's no tool that we know of, nor no kind of company that we know would come in and grind it up. Plus, I'm worried about hurting whatever's roots it is, not just from what is no longer there. And at this point, we're thinking we're going to have to just plant a few plants, just dig right where we're planting, and that's it. But I'm curious if anybody has any ideas or, I don't know, alternatives or any suggestions.
Well, at first comes to mind for me is more of cover cropping type things that would have shallower roots. I'm thinking of crimson clover for one,
Mm.
and that's something that it doesn't necessarily grow well in the summertime. It's kind of dies back, and that's in the springtime. But it's really beautiful. You would plant it with the rains in October, November, well, probably November. We haven't typically gotten rain in October the last few years. And then it'll come up in January, February, and just have this carpet of beautiful red
Mm.
flowers. It's low growing and it adds a lot of nitrogen to your soil, and the roots can help break up soil. And so you could start growing your soil that way by using some creative cover crops, and then plant a couple of strategically placed plants where you do have some deeper soil that's available to you. And that could be a nice combo. There
Yeah,
are some other ground cover possibilities too. You could also seed wildflowers in there. They don't really need a whole lot of soil to be able to take hold.
there are some pine trees that are still on the other side of the fence there. So there's and it's a fairly, it gets morning sun, but that's it. So it's a fairly shady area, but it does have a lot of that
Yeah.
pine needly layer. I don't know if that inhibits growth on anything or I don't know. We don't have raw dirt exposed there now, I guess is what I'm saying. There's a lot of leaf litter and we've tried to break it up. Obviously it's clay underneath there. But there's been, I don't know how many years of leaves breaking down too. So it's, there is something that could start growing in there. If we add some dirt or, I'm really no-till, so I'm like really nervous. She wants to like tear the whole thing up. And I'm like, no, you're releasing gases. Please don't do that. But that's an idea. I haven't thought about a cover crop. That's interesting. That would be pretty. Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, I'm going to think about that some more. And if I come up with a good answer, I'll include it in the follow-up email. But what Annie was saying made me think kind of similar with the breaking down of the pine depth is if you could just be adding on organic material, composting and mulch in the area to just help create additional soil basically on top, that might give you a little more room to work with. Not right away, but over time as that composts in place, just so that there's a little more real estate for plants that are trying to establish roots.
Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah, thank you. That's helpful.
Oftentimes on Craigslist or Nextdoor, you'll see fill dirt too, and you could think about bringing in dirt and just having a raised area.
Yeah, that's true too. Okay, yeah, thank you.
Nancy, do you have a question? All right, so we just have a couple minutes remaining. We have time, I'd say, for one more question if somebody wants to squeeze one in. Okay, otherwise, we will be sending out next week the recording of this. Oh, PJ, go ahead.
Well, it's not really drought related, so maybe it's not appropriate. We lost a large maple tree to mistletoe, and we'd like to replace it. And we're trying to decide what would be a good replacement tree, because I was told that was a red maple and that their bark is thin, and so it's easy for mistletoe to get established. So are there other species of fairly large trees, especially something that has some nice fall color, that are less susceptible to mistletoe? The only one that I've heard about is ginkgo, which is a gorgeous tree, but they're pretty slow growing. So that would be the downside of ginkgo.
That's a good question. I'm trying to think fall color. Annie, have you seen mistletoe in many, like, I mean, it's technically in the maple family, but like the liquid ambars, the sweet gums?
I haven't. Not in
I
our
haven't
neighborhood.
either. They're really common trees, so like it's not gonna stand out a lot, but the color they put on is really wonderful. I don't know about their growth rate. I've never planted one. I just see them all over the place.
Yeah, I think they're pretty fast, actually.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's
But
another one we
that's
can.
not, I don't think establishing a major tree is something we should be doing in a drought, though.
No.
So we'll have to wait. Okay, thank you.
Trees are also really great recipients for laundry to landscape gray water systems because they are so thirsty and they appreciate getting that less frequent, higher volume of watering at a time. And so if you're thinking about a laundry to landscape system, you could pre-plan by digging out your mulch basins and then having that tree be the recipient of your laundry water.
Mhm. Okay, interesting.
That's a
Thank
great
you.
point.
All right. Well, we are out of time, but it's been so wonderful to have you all participate and ask your questions and give feedback. This is a format that I really appreciate. I love being able to hear from you all and share our expertise together. So look for that recording that we'll send out next week, along with some resources. And if there's any other ideas that Connor and I come up with, we'll include those too. And you'll have access to all of the beautiful plants that Connor prepared, as well as all of the descriptions. And we look forward to your feedback and comments, and drop us a line, email us if you have questions. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you all so much for being here.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. Have a good night, everybody.
Take care.
All right, bye. Bye, everyone.
All right.
So I wasn't sure if it was my internet that was unstable or yours. At some point, it was fairly like pixelated audio. I'm hoping it doesn't show up on the recording.